But would anybody like to ask a question or two? I'll throw it open. Yes.
So, what made you decide for the title Awakened Leadership? What's the story behind that?
There is. There is. What happens is that when you go out and you start in your career, the first thing they teach you how to do is master all of the content, right? So in school, if you take trigonometry and you get really, really good at trigonometry, you now have mastered trigonometry, right? And so that's what they teach you when you go out into the world, that you need to understand in order to really be good at what you do. But what happens is that to be really, really good at what you do, there's internal maturity, the maturity of who you are that needs to happen. And part of my story you'll read, I went off to India for a while because I wanted to understand. I had done a lot of reading, and I started to see that there might be a point of view that was, different than maybe ours, because they worked a lot with how to expand internally. That was sort of the way of looking at things from the Eastern perspective. And I thought, well, that's something that's really, really interesting. And I noticed that they used the word awakening to describe that. And I thought, well, really, that's what this is. It's beyond self-mastery, right? Because it's beyond learning trigonometry or mastering all the stuff, right? What is it? What do I want to call it? And I said, no, I want to call this awakened leadership. And so the subtitle of the book is Beyond Self-Mastery, right? So it's what happens after you really know all your stuff. Is there still somewhere to go? And the answer is, yeah, there's an internal expansion and maturity to go from it's just about me to it's about something more than just me, right? That to sort of say, what is that? What are we going to call that? And I call that awakening. It's when you sort of wake up and go, wait a minute. And you have it when, for parents, the first time you have a child, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? All of a sudden, it's more than just you, isn't it? Yeah. If you've had a kid, you had that moment, right? And then you start to go, well, wait a minute, I want to take this moment and make it everything that it is. Because you go back to being selfish, as you fight, you do, like what parents won't tell you is that they have a really hard time making it always about you, because inside sometimes they want to make it about them, and so they have to have that fight inside about that, right? And what would really make life easier is if you didn't have to have that fight. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just go, wait a minute, I'm not going to think about me anymore? Well, we haven't learned how to do that. We're not too good at that, to be honest with you. So how do you learn how to do that? And that's what that book's about. That book's about how do you learn how life is just not about just me. And I call it awakening, because I thought that would signify that.
It was cunning drug.
Huh?
Cunning.
Cunning, thank you. Cunning drug. Go ahead.
If you could just summarize your thoughts on this, it might be a little too broad, but for someone who might be in between successes, maybe like on a plateau, and everything just seems like taking it to the next level is just beyond you, it's bigger than you. Any words of wisdom?
Buy the book. Oh, you're going to get it.
Yeah, it's all in the book. The reality is that in my lifetime, and you read about that, I came to the place where I was incredibly successful. But I was really troubled inside. And I think that the reason probably was that what was nourishing for me naturally wasn't in my success that I was having. And so what I did was I started to look for something that was bigger than that. And that's when I went to India and I read and I took, I did a lot of work with myself to try to say, well, what is it that will nourish me as a human being in terms of what it is that I do in this life? And that's part of that path of maturity. So usually when people are in between successes and they're sort of troubled inside, and you could be troubled or you could just simply not know what to do. I mean, you can use a lot of different words for that place, whatever that is. What's happened is that whatever you've done to this point isn't really the thing that nourishes you. And so the thing that I tell people is go find that. In other words, go start to take a look, what is it that nourishes you? Because when you come into touch with that, you'll know that. And in the moment that you do that, because here's the other thing that people do, is that they find something that nourishes them, and then they don't, the problem is that the mind jumps in sometimes, and it has opinions about everything. It makes you hop like a butterfly from flower to flower. And so they'll find something that's nourishing instead of really just staying with it. They move on to the next thing. And they just don't, no one's told them, hey, look, if you find that, don't move. Stay there. Explore that, go deep into that, and take a real close look. And you'll know it, for me anyway, people learn in different ways. I'm what they call a kinesthetic person, I'm a feeler. So I always know when I'm in the right place when I feel something. So if I walk into a room and nourishment is happening, like this for me is a very nourishing experience. It wouldn't have mattered how many people showed up. I'm sitting on the corner of Main and 6th in Corona. You see, for me, that's just a nourishing event, all in and of itself. All I need to do is come back here, and I'm happy. You know, why? I don't know. You know, why do I love Corona? It beats the heck out of me. Don't have to. Doesn't need to be. Doesn't seem to be necessary. You know, but I do. You know, it's just part of how I did it. When I wrote the book, there's a fellow in town that works for the city of Corona. His name's Daryl Talbot. Daryl Talbot took that manuscript, and I asked him to tear that thing apart, and he did. He wrote copious notes on that thing for me. Daryl's just a very close friend of mine. You know, he's a little younger than I am. His dad used to be the chief of police in town. You know, I've known Daryl for forever. You know, is Daryl, you and Daryl close to the same age?
No, he's younger.
Yeah. So anyway.
He'll point that out.
Yeah, he'll mention that.
I don't want to lie.
But so you know, you can even tell in my actions that one of the things I really wanted was that if the richness of my stories were going to be real in some way, I wanted somebody else who was rooted in this place to read them and say, yeah, that's it. You got it. That was important to me. So Daryl became a really important part of what I did. And so for me, ultimately, what was incredibly nourishing was not only this movement towards internal expansion, but this rootedness in what really fed me as I grew up. And it was something, you know, when people ask me where I'm from, well, yeah, I could say I was from somewhere else. I only got here when I was in 3rd grade. But I'm from Corona. You know, this is what makes me happy. You know, and they're, you know, going to Miguel's Jr., that makes me happy. You know, it does. You know, I mean, there are certain things that happen in Corona, they make me happy. You know, they're part of our world and what we all hold together. You know, they put a new Cupid's out on the other side of Grand. I know it's just the new one, but driving by a building and seeing Cupid's on it makes me happy. It used to be Cupid's before. The old Cupid's was down there, and anybody that drove on that side of Grand and saw Cupid's. The old Silver Dollar Pancake House, still alive, and that makes me happy. See, I go around the top end of Grand and see all those old houses and whatever shape they're in. That's all part of the world that I grew up in and that I'm rooted to. So my advice to you is go find that. Go find the nourishing pieces, and when you feel them or however it is you digest them, go there and add that onto your next.
I like that. It'll open my mind.
Right, and add that onto your next success. Make your next success hold that piece. That's what I was saying earlier. I'm standing last week in the front of a group of people that run a $56,000, $10 billion a year company, telling them stories about shooting mistletoe down in the old wash out of oak trees in Corona. Right? I'm sharing with them, you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's nourishing to me. Right? That makes my world work. So find the nourishing and add it in.